We have a quorum.
今日係環境日啊，今朝個 OK 啊，今朝嗰個嚇。好啦，各位委員，我哋
Members, it's the appointed time. We have a quorum. Let's start the meeting. I call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of December 2012. Is paper CB bracket 1568/12-13. It's been given to members and we have received no proposals for amendment. Minutes confirmed. Item 2, information paper issued since last meeting. We have not received any information paper, so no discussion is required. Then is the items for discussion at the next meeting. May I ask the administration to be invited in? Items for discussion at the next meeting. The administration proposed that for the meeting on the 25th of March, that is a Monday, discussions on provision of storage in Tolo Harbour and North District. I think they only need to get the endorsement of the panel. Well, discussion can be long or short. And the second item proposed is the proposed injection into the Environment and Conservation Fund. It's one of the items mentioned in the policy address. Are there any other items that members would like to discuss in the meeting on the 25th of March? Perhaps let's wait for the administration to be seated. There is a new face. Let's welcome her. Is Michelle Au, Political Assistant to Secretary for the Environment. And we have with us the Secretary and Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, Mr. Albert Lam. We're talking about items on the agenda of the next meeting. There are two items proposed by the administration. One is in relation to the storage. I think it's rather short. Mr. Lam, can you give us more information? All right, you're not seated yet. Let me tell you that it is in relation to storage in Tolo Harbour and North District. And the other one, this is a public works item. The other one is a proposed injection into the ECF. Perhaps with your agreement, we can discuss one more item. If there are no objections, maybe I will discuss with the Bureau to see if we can add one more item to the next meeting so as not to waste time. Next is the fourth item on the agenda. Visit to South Korea on waste management. Before I ask the Secretary to give us an introduction, I'd like to say a few words. This panel, at the first meeting, we have had a discussion with the Bureau that when it comes to environmental protection, we can draw reference from different jurisdictions. And this will form a common basis. It doesn't mean that we will have the same stance, which is just that we will look at the same thing, that our stance will be very dependent. The Policy Bureau will have a visit to South Korea on waste management in April. It includes waste management in a residential area, on waste reduction, waste recycling, all the way to a retail level. They will also visit a landfill. And when it comes to the electrical, I've discussed with the Deputy Chairman that maybe around the same time we can have a visit to South Korea, because we will shortly talk about waste charging and also landfill, etc. If we have an overseas visit and we have the same set of information, then it will facilitate information, because in this way we both know what the other party has seen. I'd like to emphasize that the duty visit of the panel is independent, and our perspective is from LegCo. On the Oriental Daily News, it says that the bureau and the secretary ordered his colleagues to get up at 6 o'clock to go out for a visit. Well, I don't think it's a matter of order. You don't need people to give you an alarm call. And our visit will be independent. And the press report says that the secretary will lead the delegation. It needs another clarification. There are two delegations, one from the LegCo, the other one from the Policy Bureau. For the Policy Bureau, they leave on the 2nd and the work will start on the 3rd. For the LegCo one, we will leave on the 1st. The Deputy Chairman has a very good proposal. We need to see the civic bodies in South Korea, and we will also meet with the legislature in Seoul. We have arrangements to meet NGO, because we know that if you meet with the officials, you will only get a rosy picture. But if you meet deputations, then you will see two sides of the story, so that we will see the whole picture for our reference. So we're talking about two delegations, one from the Policy Bureau, the other from the LegCo. And on the 3rd day, the itinerary will be the same as that of the Policy Bureau delegation. Anything to add, Deputy Chairman? No? Secretary, would you please give us information about your visit? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, for clarifying that there are two visits. Two visits, just that they are to the same place. I am sure that we share the same view, that when it comes to municipal solid waste, we have the same plan in mind about reduction, recycling, and also end of pipe treatment for waste. The South Korea has been doing it for 2 decades, and their practice will be of good reference value for Hong Kong. And I'll defer to the political assistant. We will visit South Korea to look at how they can tackle waste at source to be sure that their policies and their measures are effective. As the Secretary said, that in the past 20 years, South Korea has put in place a number of policies and measures to reduce the waste by 60%. And they have a waste charging system and also the polluter pays principle. So one of our key purpose is to look at tackling waste at source, and we'll also look at the green industries, the development of the green industry. And then on another day, we will also look at the end of pipe treatment for waste, say for example state-of-the-art incinerators and the use of landfill. This will be our itinerary for the 3rd day. Priority will be given on waste reduction. It will be then extended to waste recycling, and then we will also look at the treatment infrastructure. Secretary, on the first day we will meet with the Environmental Bureau of South Korea to get an understanding about the challenges, their visions, blueprints, to get a general idea. Our delegation will meet with the municipalities of Seoul about the actual implementation of these measures and policies. I think we will come across more details, and then I will defer to Miranda of the Secretariat to give you more information about our visit. Thank you. I have actually prepared a document. It's paper 590/12-13-02. It's about arrangements for undertaking overseas duty visits by committees of the Legislative. I'm sure members are quite familiar with the arrangements. In short, if there is a need for panels to conduct panels can conduct overseas duty visits, but it has to be done with the consent of the House Committee. So if members agree that there is a need for an overseas duty visit, we will make a proposal this Friday at the House Committee for their consideration. There will be a budget funding for members. For each term, every member is provided with an overseas duty visit account of $55,000. So it is for the use of members in a 4-year term, not per visit. In paragraph 6, you see that we have made a preliminary estimate. If we stick to the itinerary of the administration, that is, from the 2nd to the 5th of April, the proposed expenditure will be about $14,900. If we leave on the 1st, it will be an additional $1,000 or so. We will seek members' advice about whether they support or object to this overseas duty visit. If you all agree, the Secretariat will submit a paper to the House Committee as soon as possible, seeking an approval. Mr. Kenneth Chan. In principle, I agree with this duty visit, although I may not have the time to participate. I've heard from the discussion, I gather that our itinerary is slightly different from that of the administrations. We'll have one additional day. We don't have the itinerary with us. I'm sure that the information will be given to the House Committee. As you know, the members will ask anyway. I'm sure that there will be some adjustments to the $14,900 in paragraph 6.
The expenditure this time is lower because in Seoul, after we meet with the administration, some local transport and interpretation fees will be shared with the administration. And if we depart one day earlier, then we would have to budget for an additional one night's accommodation. Now, as for meeting with civic bodies and municipal council, we are arranging for that, and we might well meet Greenpeace as well as a civic group on zero waste management. Ms. Mo, I agree with this small-scale visit, and I agree that we should be independent of the administration in our visit. So we will go on the same trip, and I think it's very good to meet with the NGOs. The government will certainly praise themselves. We need to see the people's reaction before we can tell what results there might be if we apply the same in Hong Kong. Any views from other members? Okay, any objection? If not, I will invite the Secretariat to submit document to the House Committee regarding this duty visit, and that would be done by this Friday, or else we wouldn't be able to leave in the first week of April. Also, I'd like to seek your views. Do we agree that this visit will be open to non-members of this panel. I see not Mr. Vincent Fang. Now, if there are too many in the visit, now we had the experience that not much could be done. It's not that I don't want to let other members join, but there are many members in this panel who are concerned about the environment and waste management. So I think there will be a large group even within this panel. And if other members are joining, then I'm afraid that the group might be a bit too large and not too much can be done. Sorry, I was late just now. Why is it that there are two groups, a group by the government and by the administration and one by us? If we are meeting the same organizations, would it be inconvenience for them? They meet the administration in one meeting 2 days earlier and then they meet us. Would that be a nuisance? Now, we leave on the 1st by playing in the evening, and then early next morning we will begin our first day of our itinerary. The Policy Bureau will not be with us, and then in the next and last few days we would be with the administration. So the bodies that receive us would not receive the administration on one day and then a couple of days later the Legislative. So we listen to the same things. So when we come back, our cognition would be the same. So we would have both listen to the same material. So the itinerary would coincide in the latter part, but on the first day, the meetings with the civic groups and with the municipal council would be limited to Legislative members. I hope all parties would go. When it comes to incinerators and fees, I think it would be controversial. So I hope all parties would send representatives. And due to the short notice, the reply slip provided by the Legislative Secretariat may not leave you much time, so please try to accommodate. Now, Mr. Fang has reservation about opening this to other members. Any views on that, Ms. Claudia Mo? Like Mr. Fang, I have a bit of reservation. This is not sightseeing. This is really a duty visit to find out more about the environmental aspects. Now, if there are too many people, then it would be very bustling and it might be a distraction. Now, for the moment, we don't know how many members of this panel would be going. It's rather short notice, so people may not be able to allow for that. So let's get some preliminary indication of interest. If all of us go, then there would be 20 already. Maybe we would see first how many of us would go, and if many are going, then we might not open the visit to others. Or take Mr. Fang, for example. If none of the two Liberal Party members are going, then there might be true for others too. Mr. Chair Wai Chun. Now, there might not be a fixed size for the group, but maybe we can get a rough idea. If all of us are very interested, then it would be difficult to take on more. Now, this is objective information only. We have 22 in this panel, right, Miranda? So let's set the limit at 22. Now, we cannot bar our own members from going, right? So I don't think we will object to that, right? Now, if there are members of this panel who are not going, then maybe we can extend invitation to others. Can you speak a bit louder, please, Mr. Wu Chi Wai and Chen Kim Po? Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, we are a duty visit group. We hope to meet with the government and civic groups and discuss with them in greater detail. Now, in these meetings, there's limited time, and if there are over 20 members, then it's too many. I think a reasonable number would be 12 as an upper limit. Now, we want the communications to be effective, not perfunctory. Mr. Chen Kim Po, I think a number in the teens would be appropriate, but maybe we can have a draw. Now, we should limit the number. Even a number in the teens is quite sizable. I agree that a large number would pose a problem, but I have a difficulty. Now, if members of this panel want to go, of course, we can't turn them down unless the parties send representatives in some form of self-discipline. Now, those who join this panel are, of course, concerned about the environment. Now, I propose this. It may be difficult to come to a conclusion here, but I hear your views. That is, you prefer a group that's not too large. But if all 22 members of the panel do go, would you object? Mr. Vincent Fang? I agree with you. If 22 members, given 22 members are there in this panel, if we don't let them go on the duty visit, it might be problematic, but do we have a group as large as 22? I think maybe not. Now, we open to members of this panel, so it can be 16 or 18, and I think that's the size that we can expect. So I don't think we should open to others. So Mr. Fang, Mr. Wu, and Mr. Chen all share the view that is we don't open to non-panel members. Any objection? If not, we'll leave it at that. So we decide not to open this to non-panel members, but I also hope that each party will try to send at least one representative. One more point, yes. The media are most concerned about this, but I don't think members would mind. Now, LegCo has a written rule that if the trip is the flight is under 6 hours, then we should take economy seats. If you want something more, you have to pay out of your own pocket. So this is a matter of concern to the media, that we shouldn't take business seats. Now, I think we all want to come up with a good policy. Also, when we talk to the Bureau, now there's the point that if media wants to report on this, then I would welcome that, but the media would have to pay for themselves, and the itinerary would be transparent and open, made open, and if members of the media come along for reporting, then every day we would provide a press release, a quite factual release. Now, if the parties concerned have different views, that would not be part of the content of the press release. So if there are no further points of view, then we will end this item of agenda here. We will invite the Secretariat to come up with a document as quickly as possible for House Committee, and the reply slips will be sent to you as quickly as possible, and you will please reply ASAP, because we are at rather short notice. So please be early so that we can make arrangement for accommodation, etc. Item number 5, public consultation on a producer responsibility scheme on glass beverage bottles. The Secretary, please. Mr. Sin, you just want to queue up, right? Yes, the Secretary. Now, I'm very glad to be at the meeting today. The public consultation on a producer responsibility scheme on glass beverage bottles. We are glad to listen to members' views. Now, the public consultation is to implement the policy for the management of municipal solid waste, to turn waste into resources. We expect to get a certain amount of financial resources and appoint a certain contractor to collect about 70% of the beverage bottles and turn them into useful material for government and private contractors. And the consultation process will be 3 months. We will contact the relevant stakeholders to exchange views. Now, starting with the public consultation, up to now, I think the society has been supportive, and of course, people do differ on details in their views. So I'd like to clarify certain points. First, the recycling objective. Can the 70% target be reached? Now, some think that deposit system would be better. Now, we do not rule out that possibility, and as mentioned in the document, now certain beverage suppliers right now do have a deposit system for the bottles to be recycled. Now, on that basis, we can exempt them from the fee, and also experiences abroad indicate that recycling rate is usually 60 to 90%. So given effective publicity and education and a comprehensive recovery network and relevant measures, I think we are confident on reaching 70%. Also, the committee is concerned about whether there are enough support facilities and outlet. Now, this is a chicken and egg problem. Now, in the consultation, the government aims through procurement and R&D to expand the demand, and in the mandatory producer responsibility arrangement, we are confident that we can create the demand for such a recycling exercise.
Paragraph 22, paragraph 20, it says that we will increase the number of recycling points for glass beverage bottles. And the third area is about the impact on beverage suppliers. This is done under the polluter pays principle to achieve environmental protection, and the relevant charging system will be based on cost recovery principle. We think that the various stakeholders, including consumers and retailers, will have to share out the equal responsibility. Say, for example, retailers will have to play a certain role in publicity and education. In relation to a concern of the trade on the development of wine, we believe that whichever way we go ahead, there will be concerns. We will be happy to listen to beverage suppliers of different types of beverage, and I'll be happy to answer questions. Let me read out some names. Gary Chan, Sin Chung Kai, Kok Wai Keung, Chung Kok Pan, Elizabeth Quat, Claudia Mo. 6 for the time being. Vincent Fang, Kenneth Chan, Wu Chi Wai. Altogether 8 members who would like to ask questions. 4 minutes each. Mr. Gary Chan. Chairman, I support the polluter pays principle. I hope that the levies will be used on areas where the levy is charged. The fees, say for example, the fees of glass beverage bottles will be paid towards subsidies of eco-pay fees. I hope that in the future, whatever charge you impose, it will also go towards environmental protection in relation to the area. We believe that, well, I understand that these eco-pay fees can only be used on a limited area. They cannot be used as bricks for walls. Well, when it comes to manufacturing in the future, there will be another problem. Green procurement of the government does not accord priority on local manufacturers. Say, for example, the pencils that you have procured, they are from the mainland. So what about the procurement of these eco-pay fees? Do you accord priority on local manufacturers and local recyclers? The second question. Now you said that in 5 districts there will be regional collection points. So would they be near areas with a lot of bars, say for example Wan Chai, Tsim Sha Tsui? Would you set up special collection points to make your scheme more effective? Secretary, I thank Mr. Chan for his views. Mr. Chan has made 3 points. The first one, we agree. The second point about outlets. Yes, apart from green eco-pay fees, we explore different ways to put these recycled glass bottles into recycled uses. So you don't have to worry. There is a way for them to be used. And the third point is about a priority accorded to local recyclers. In some policy groups internally, there are proposals made, and so you see that there will be priorities accorded to give an advantage to local recyclers. And I will ask Albert to supplement. Our idea is to set up regional collection points in 5 areas. And there will be, on top of that, community green stations. In relation to community green stations, our plan is that to set these stations up in various districts to help keep the cost down for recyclers. We heard from the local recyclers that transportation cost is a burden for them. If we have collection points in different districts, they can act as a midway point. For items like glass bottles, items that are quite heavy, if there are community green stations, it will help recyclers. I'd like to follow up on. The Secretary just now said that they are discussing about priority accorded to local recyclers. Is it just limited to eco-pay fees or different all the items? Secretary, please be brief. We're still thinking about it. We will report to the panel at the right time. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. I want to talk about paragraph 21. You mentioned about expanding the responsibility scheme to aluminium cans and plastic. My understanding is that after considering it, you think it will be better not to cover them. As you all know that if you impose a fee, the cost will increase and there will be a shift towards aluminium cans and plastic bottles. So people will buy aluminium cans, carton boxes and plastic bottles instead. Plastic bottles and aluminium cans are recyclable. Well, you know that there are a lot of old people collecting aluminium cans. Why don't you cover all recyclable items? Aluminium cans, plastic bottles, glass bottles. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Sin. Our understanding is that there are, well, about 80% of these containers are alcohol beverage. They are, for these, most of them are glass bottles and they won't switch to other forms. And as to whether there will be a change of the 15%, well, I'd like to say that the amount is small, 15% only. And if there are substitutes, then we won't rule out the possibility, but it is not the crux of the problem. We want to target certain product and promote local recycling industry. Currently, aluminium cans are for exports after they've been collected and recycled. There will be different policies for different products. When you look at aluminium cans and plastic bottles in the market, there is a mechanism for them to be recovered. And when it comes to glass bottles, transportation cost is higher. If there is no producer responsibility scheme, there is no incentive for the market to take up glass bottles for collection and recycling. Well, I don't know. Well, maybe people who drink a beer or alcoholic beverage prefer glass bottles. But you can't rule the possibility that people would use aluminium cans instead of buying glass bottles. Or you think that, well, since aluminium cans are being collected, so it won't be an issue. When it comes to glass bottles, if the government doesn't get involved, the recycling rate will be very low. No, I'm not against it. I'm just saying that why don't you cover the other types of containers? If you tackle just glass bottles, people will switch to, say, aluminium cans. Oh, there is actually a priority here. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. I think the administration should take into consideration what Mr. Sin said. For alcoholic beverage, wine is one of them. There is also beer. I think we're talking about a large amount coming from glass bottle. There is a chance that bars will switch to aluminium cans. You have to take that into consideration. The Secretary mentioned about recycling from a domestic level. Mainly they rely on the deposit deposit refund system, but we're talking only about a small amount, 50 cents or $1. Some people would rather chuck them into the bin instead of going all the way to return them. So with your proposal in place, will glass bottles be sorted out from the waste going to landfill? Glass bottles may be worth something, but people may still discard them. And are there any standard for the deposit refund? 50 cents, $1? You can raise that deposit. It may be expensive, but people can claim that amount back, so consumers don't stand to lose. So would you regulate the amount of a deposit? Secretary. There are 3 questions here. First, under the scheme, there is priority. We now tackle glass beverage bottles first, and as to whether there will be a shift towards, say, aluminium cans, and how we can ensure that the recycling rates for aluminium cans will be higher. Well, I'd like to clarify about the deposit refund system. And when it comes to soft drinks, there is a deposit refund system. The bottle will be reused, not for recycling. And that is something that we support, and it will be exempted under the scheme. And how do we increase the incentive from the contractors to encourage people to recycle glass bottles for other uses, say for example eco-pavers? Well, we can make a bigger effort on publicity and education. We don't rule out possibilities of other incentives, but it is premature to give details. And in the paper, you'll find information about a landfill ban. In different jurisdictions, there are different approaches. The cost is high if you want to sort out glass bottles in waste going to the landfill. But when it comes in bulk, say for example waste from bars, I don't think that should go to the landfill. If there is a landfill ban, there will be administrative cost. If there is an effective recycling system in place, say for example 70%, it will be alright. I think after weighing the pros and cons, if 30% of the waste goes to landfill, it's acceptable. Mr. Chung Kwok Pan. I have a question for the Secretary. This producer responsibility scheme, you now charge importers and distributors, but these bottles are discarded by users or consumers. If you don't separate at source, how can you recover a sufficient amount of glass bottles, because you charge not the people who discard them, and they can be discarded anywhere, so you will have to educate the users about separation at source for it to be effective. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chung, for his question. We thought about it as to on which level should we impose the charge. There are 2 general directions. First, the importer or manufacturer, it will be more focused. The scope will be narrower. But as Mr. Chung said, the effect will not go all the way to consumers. There won't be much of an incentive for waste separation at source. But we can think along this line. When the scheme is implemented, if we have municipal waste charging, then people will have to think about the cost involved. if there is no separation at the domestic level, it will increase the waste charge. Now that itself is an incentive for them to separate the waste. And currently, in a lot of buildings, we have the recycling bins. There is no financial incentive for the public to separate them. Still, a lot of people separate the waste into these recycling bins. So in short, actually, we can put in place waste charging and also encourage people to separate.
Chairman, if we don't deal with it at source, then even if you levy charges, you may get the money, but it may not be effective because you don't separate at source. Some people saying that 50 cents may not be a large sum, they just discard it as they used to, so you do not get the result you desire. Now let me supplement. Now, there are two main sources. Firstly, bars, restaurants, catering establishments. At these sources, we work with the recycling contractor so that there is separation at source at these establishments, and they are a large part of the source. And then at residences, at housing estates, we try to facilitate that. Now, with plastic, paper, and aluminium utensils, we are able to recycle a certain percentage, and if we do have cooperation with the contractors concerned, we are confident of achieving over 70%. Now, supplement. Now, for recycling, as the Secretary said, for the tricolor bins, we do not offer direct incentives to the households, but according to the figures we get, the recycling rate in Hong Kong is now about 49%. This is through publicity, education, tricolor bins, and working with the various green groups. Now, if we have the hardware and we have certain measures to work with the contractor, and I think we can achieve the effect with glass bottles too. Now, we are talking about targeted use of funds, and looking at the document, it says that the money received would be used to pay towards a contractor by tender, and if the contractor does not use up all the money, would there be a fund to promote the recycling industry? And then with this contractor, how will you regulate the contractor so that you can work with the producer of the using the recycled materials? Also, there are factories in Hong Kong manufacturing eco-pavers, and they feel that for the green industry to succeed, apart from the high cost of recovering glass bottles, they also have difficulty with finding land because the machines are large and they have difficulty getting loans from banks. Now, Mr. Chair can mention that the government are able to help some of them, or part of the matter, and so how are you able to help the recycling industry? There are three issues here. I will ask my colleague to supplement. Now, first, on targeted use of funds, or funds, specific funds for specific purpose. Now, we hope to receive enough money to compensate, to pay for the cost of the recovery and recycling process. So if we get more than the cost, that we try not to let that happen, because we just try to recover the cost. Now, on the third question, on how land can be subsidized, or in some way and assistance can be provided to the producer. Now, this is an important issue for the producers. Now, in the coming months, we will meet with the environmental practitioners. We will try to facilitate the continued operation in respect of land, etc. But now, as for how the contractor can achieve our recycling target, now, right now we are still working on the public consultation. We hope to get members of the public's views. Now, with the contractor, we will give him a target. Now, maybe I misunderstood. I'm not asking how the recycler achieves the target, but I'm asking how the government would monitor or regulate the contractor so that it can be fair. Now, if the contractor is tied only to one eco-paper producer, is that okay? Or how to be fair to other producers? Now, in the document, we mentioned that there are uses for the glass bottle, for the glass produced. Now, we will stipulate what the contractor should do with the material. We will stipulate that in the document. Now, maybe I'm still not understood. Now, you seem to be tendering for only one contractor, and then the contractor will decide to whom the waste would be turned over to, which producers. Now, this is a monopoly issue, because you end up with only one contractor. So it's not just the relations with the producers. Now, you have does this single contractor do everything? Now, I think we can give this further thought, but I think we agree with the principle, that is, now there may be just one contractor who works for the government. Now, there should be fair participation, and after recycling, the material should be supplied to different producers. I think we will give these details close thought. Ms. Claudia Mo, a basic question. Now, the government has done a lot of publicity, so we know it's recycling of glass bottles. But people do not know that it's just recycling of glass beverage bottles. And as mentioned, 85% is for alcoholic beverages. Now, why do you leave out non-beverage bottles? The grandmas think that the condiments bottles, soy sauce bottles, etc., are not part of it. Now, I know that it's a lot of problem, a lot of work cleaning them, but why don't you, it's just a matter of cleaning, why don't you include these soy sauce bottles, etc.? Also, the consultation document has made it very clear that the government will have a public tender to appoint one contractor, just one qualified contractor. Now, I fear that we are in a very densely populated society, close economy. People are related to each other in some ways. Why don't you talk about different contractors in different parts of Hong Kong, the island, Kowloon, New Territories, outlying islands? If one doesn't work out, then others can take up, and you might even have a franchise. I don't know about your mechanism, but I'm concerned that there might be special advantages. So on my third issue, I quote the Green Power. Now, they write in English.
Recycling fund， 佢就冇講係點樣 public 法，但係政府既然係有錢。
They didn't say what kind of fund. Now, since the government has the money for this, why don't you set up a fund where the sums are all transparent, like the URA? The money is put in there first, and the Environmental Protection Department, Environmental Bureau would be responsible, and it would be self-financing. The Bureau would monitor. Thank you. Now, it would be a good opportunity to educate the public on appropriate recycling of glass beverage bottles. Now, this producer responsibility scheme that we are talking right now doesn't cover soy sauce or oyster sauce bottles. Now, but if the households can clean these bottles properly, they are welcome to put them in the recycling bin, and they would be recycled. Now, the soy sauce is not expensive. Now, why are these bottles not included? Are they too expensive because of the cleaning involved? Now, on the levy, now if at this stage we cover the soy sauce bottles, etc., soy sauce and other condiments that are not expensive, then it would be more costly. And if people do the cleaning and then the bottles are recycled, we welcome that. So,
Mr. Vincent Fang. Well, after listening to the Secretary, I'm confused. It seems that for alcoholic beverage glass, a charge will be imposed. When it comes to sauce bottles, since it's related to livelihood, it will not be touched. Is that the case? It gives the impression to bars and beverage sellers that they are targeted. I have a number of questions. First, are there actually bottles recycled or collected? What is the rate? And we already have recyclers making eco-papers. What is the amount or volume? On the paper, we talk about glass beverage bottles. You're talking about 132 tons. What is the current tonnage? If we have to produce 132 tons of eco-papers, how many recycling plants do we have? Do we need to have? And according to Mr. Gary Chan, if we have to use all 132 tons of glass bottles to make eco-papers, can you ensure the sales of these papers? Because if there is no demand, then you produce the eco-papers, but they will not be used. And for consumers, they may pay $1. They may be happy, willing to pay that $1 for environmental protection when they consume alcoholic beverage. But if the $1 does not go in the end to environmental protection, say if you don't have a sufficient volume, then the bottles are discarded in the end. Then the dollar I paid will be wasted. So can the administration ensure that all these alcoholic drink bottles will be turned into eco-papers? And you said that they will be used as construction material. I think that is sometime in the future. The only use currently is eco-papers. So the administration has to ensure that there is demand for the green industries to have a future. You also said that if there is a system like depository fund system in place, then you'll be exempted. I know that under the system, then the bottles will be reused, they will be rebottled. But in the end, these bottles will become unusable. So do they have to pay the glass management contractors when they give these spent bottles to the contractor, and how much should they pay? And when it comes to the glass management contractors, I do think the administration will have to be very careful. According to the Secretary, it's only a preliminary idea. You have not even gone to the details of the whole plan. You have to be very cautious. If it's a monopoly, that means he will have the entire market to himself. Secretary, whether the contractor will be a monopoly, I think, well, it's a matter of opinion. And in relation to the depository fund system, and after the bottles have been reused a dozen times, I don't think they should be charged when these bottles eventually go to recycling. When it comes to the materials, we are fully confident, and we would like to give the undertaking that these recovered glass bottles will have a use that is environmentally friendly. Currently, there is coordination with different government departments that there will be adequate use for these recycled glass bottles to become construction materials. I say, for example, partitioned wall bricks, and they will be put to good use locally. Mr. Kenneth Chan, thank you. The Civic Party in general support the producer responsibility scheme as a direction. We will read carefully the consultation paper. Members have asked questions along the same line. We need more information, otherwise it will be difficult to have further discussion. Because you said in your paper there is one or more, but we all have in mind only one. And maybe in the end you won't be able to find any. It's not the first time when you can't, there is no submission under a tendering system, under the tendering exercise. So what if the tendering exercise did not end in the selection of a contractor? So can I have more information? Whether there is sufficient demand or that there's sufficient amount of glass bottles to support the work of the contractor. You appeal to the public to recycle glass bottles. What if there is an insufficient amount of glass bottles recovered? Will you provide subsidy to the contractor? Another issue is about the use. In the paper, you mentioned about eco-papers. And would there be flexibility in the agreement of the contractor that if an excessive amount of bottle is recovered, will the contractor be allowed to have flexibility to put the material into different use. Maybe it's not for local use. They might have been sold overseas. That benefits overseas recycling industry instead of the local one. Secretary, first about the use. Every stakeholder from the administration to everyone, we all have a role to play. The role of the government is the most aggressive. In the coming year or two, we will step up our effort on R&D to explore other uses. We have confidence that there will be many use into which they can put in public works projects. So locally, we are confident that if we recovered 7% or more glass bottles, it will be sufficient for them to be put to use in the local market in, say, public works projects. In relation to the contractor, we're talking about a recycling network and a process. It will take the lead. They play a role. Cost. We've drawn reference from overseas jurisdictions. We have a preliminary idea that it is about $1 per liter. There will be a tendering process to select one or more contractors. We will look at their proposals about their cost. Say, for example, recovery and transportation, and then work out the cost per liter. That can be done. The contract will be renewed, so the charge might be adjusted. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. About the charge or the fees of the contractor, well, I think that at the moment the aluminium cans is related to the market. We're talking about $50 million of business a year. I don't really understand. The fees collected will be channeled towards recyclers, but what about the fees, the fee level set? That can only be determined after the tender. What if there is a surplus? What if there is a shortfall? Is the government going to fill the gap? If there is a gap, is say $2 per liter, who is going to pay the difference? Secretary. We have to take into consideration the local situation and overseas practice. There is a tendering process. We get the amount, we get the figures, and then we work out the fee level per liter, say $1 or $2. Or say, for example, per kilogram. And this is pegged to the transportation cost. My question was, Chairman, that if there is a shortfall from the amount you've collected, then the government will pay the difference. Well, we're talking about a consumer pay. There's already a pilot scheme in place and it's rather effective. And I believe that under this pilot scheme, you have mobilized a large number of a community network. How can you incorporate the social networks into your scheme so as not to waste these networks? Recovering aluminium cans and newspapers are so successful because there is a value on these items. and the value is attractive enough for members of the public to participate, I think you should think about putting a price tag on glass bottles to get members of the public, say old people, to recover the glass bottles for you. And then you work on the use. Secretary, I understand the analysis of Mr. Wu. Our understanding is that glass bottle is different from other materials, say for example aluminium cans. The latter has a higher recycled value and is lighter. So it's easy to see the value in the market. When it comes to glass bottles, it's heavier, transportation cost is higher, and the reusable value is lower. So you can't treat it as the same as other materials. That's why the administration has to intervene, because there is a principal difference between glass bottles and other materials. It's not as simple as putting a price tag on it. Of course, I agree that we should make good use of existing community networks. We explore the possibility of incorporating such networks with the contractor. There are still 2 members waiting for the second round. I have to draw a line here. I'm sorry. There is a 3-month consultation period. I personally think that the information on this consultation paper is not comprehensive. There is no information about the deposit refund system, and you started off by saying which way is most effective. But what about scavengers already in the community? With a single contractor being selected, will it affect the old people who are scavengers? You take away the chance for them to earn a humble living by collecting wastes. Well, what about rebottling industry in Hong Kong? If that can be done, then you can have an effective deposit refund system. We know that these bottles, if they are in this system, will fetch quite a good price. I'm sure that households or domestic helpers will help you collect these bottles just to make a bit more. I think this is a lopsided consultation paper. I hope that you will all give your views. Is there a need for us to have a public hearing before we hear from the second round? Do we need a public hearing, Mr. Kenneth Chan? Yes, I agree with that. I was going to ask that. And there is a responsibility of the panel to listen to views. And I hope the administration will give us as much information as possible. Say, for example, the business model, whether it is financially sustainable. I think we have to have repeated discussions and to get information from the administration.
This consultation is for 3 months, so we don't have to fix a date right now. Second round, Ms. Kwok first. I'd like the government to consider. Now, we thought that this money would be for dedicated use, but I don't get that impression after hearing from the Secretary, because the Secretary said that there wouldn't be any surplus. Now, how can you be so exact? What if you get more than the cost? So we don't get an answer. Of course, if you collect more than what's the cost, you should put that money in a fund or a dedicated fund for the industry. So right now, we don't know how this supports the recycling industry. We don't know how the money surplus can be used. So I hope you can tell us next time clearly how the money is to be used. We want it to be dedicated use. Now, maybe there isn't time for an answering my question. Now, how do you measure in your tender? Do you measure by the amount of money or the number of bottles collected? Now, also, it's like catering. Recycling industry doesn't provide a very attractive work environment. So these companies that submit bids, they try to pay very little money, so maybe you can't hire enough, they can't hire enough workers. Now we don't have standard work hours and the working environment is poor, so the industry may not be able to develop. 5 seconds, Secretary. The government would not just look at money in its tender exercise. There would be other considerations. So if you consider certain factors should be included in the tender exercise, you can supply that to the government or you can raise that in the public hearing. Our next item, the measures to tackle fly tipping of construction and demolition waste and illegal land filling. We have 2 other members of the administration. The Secretary and Ms. Au will stay. Mr. Lam will be here. Is here. I'm sorry. It's now item number 6. The Secretary will be replaced.
嗱，咁我好快介紹出席嘅官員，就係陸恭蕙副局長，歐詠子女士係政治助理，黎耀基先生環保署嘅廢物管理政策嘅，咁就第2排嘅呢，就係環保署環保法規管理嘅黃德威先生，地政署助理處長林慧霞女士，規劃處助理處長係特別職務嘅余賜堅先生，同埋規劃處總城市規劃師中央執行管制陳永榮先生。咁就請局方就介紹呢份文件啦。文件嘅編號係 CB括弧1 至13年度嘅569號括弧06。係。
主席，我知道咧就時間而家係少咗一啲嘅，咁我就想即係徵求大家嘅意見啦。我哋講呢個非法棄置呢一度咧，就有可能我就比較講得好簡短啦。因為呢個問題咧，雖然對呢一屆嘅立法會係新嘅話咧，對前2屆立法會我相信啲議員們啦都討論過嘅。咁我相信大家都明白啦，即係呢個要處理呢類咁樣嘅非法堆填同埋非法嘅棄置啦，實在係唔容易嘅。咁我哋通過立法會啦。
Land filling, this is not easy, and I think the LegCo has supplied you all with documents, and the government has conducted consultation. So I just like to say that we are now preparing to tighten the law enforcement to make it easier, to tighten the legislation to make it easier to enforce the law. So some people discard the material and then we have to investigate whether there was permission, and then we have to find out who was the landowner, and it took a lot of time. So we are now proposing to amend the regulations. So you have to obtain the permission from all the owners before you can get by. So I will not talk at length about this. Maybe members will ask whether this is feasible, and we will be glad to answer the questions. So I will stop here. So may I have a show of hands to see how many members have questions? Right now there are 3, Kwok Wai Keung, Sin Chung Kai, and Cheng Han Bun, and also I have questions. Also Ms. Wong, Big One, 4 minutes each for right now, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Now, the amendment of legislation, would that resolve small-scale fly tipping? Now, at North Point, every once in a while, there would be some dual-purpose vans that dip some decoration waste in the evenings, and they open the van doors and they discard several bags of waste and then they leave. Now, this took place over quite a long period. Now, can you resolve this through legislation? Now, we are trying to deal with it regarding to the land matters, but maybe we can't deal with the dumping on the streets at night time. Now, right now, when demolition or construction waste is to be dumped, there must be permission from the legal occupiers. Now, in new territories, we found that for private land, this is difficult, especially when evidence is to be collected. So we hope to strengthen the mechanism so that even before the tipping, we make sure that there is permission from the owners and there is resources for the EPD. So when this is done, then we can expedite the prosecution process. Now, as for gathering evidence, it depends on the case, whether the illegal tipper is caught, etc. So the Undersecretary mentioned that illegal tipping and dumping has had a long history and there have been problems. So this bill will deal with some of the problems. Now, as Mr. Lai said, the bill deals with large-scale dumping in the new territories, but as for the urban areas, the streets, street corners, can the Bureau or the EPD step up enforcement? Now, very often, the inspection take place only during office hours, so the illegal dumpers do it outside of office hours. So the Kai Fongs find 2 bags of waste every morning. So we talk to the EPD. Now this is a vicious circle. Who can help the Kai Fongs with this? Undersecretary. This is a very difficult question to answer. I can only say that we are now talking about the amendment of this piece of legislation. This is to help our enforcement in the rural areas, and we do not resolve all the issues, and the issue you mentioned is not part of the objective in our amendments. Maybe you can prosecute more easily using the anti-littering legislation. Now, if we catch them doing it, then we can take action more easily. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Now, this amendment, of course, tightens the legislation, and we think we should support that. But looking at Annex 4 and the relevant part of the document, you say that there are several private sites in the latest situation, and the scale is under certain control. Now, before the bill comes into effect, now if similar situations occur at other locations, what can the government do? Now, well, maybe not, right? Para 11 and Annex 4 mainly target the cases outside the town planning ordinance. Perhaps someone from the town planning department, please. In the new territories, in the conservation areas, including the coastal areas under protection and the green belts. Now, if there is to be landfilling, application is required. So town planning board's permission is required, and so we regulate that. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Now, right now, they dump in landfills without authorization, and if that happens, what can you do? Now, right now they do it without authorization, and they dump in the rural areas. Now you tighten that. Now, before the tightening takes place, and if this dumping occurs, what can you do? Now, in these areas, if these areas are DPA areas, development plan areas, we can take action under the town planning ordinance. We can exercise enforcement. Mr. Chen Hong Ban. Now, I moved this bill last time. This case last time concerning the case at Chuen Long. Earlier, we know that there was a big problem at Chuen Long. And looking at this case, in 2011, complaint was received already, and the planning department said that there's nothing they could follow up on, but still it was illegal dumping. So no department follow-up that year, and in 2012 the public complained again, and after that it seemed that there wasn't much follow-up, and then in 2013 there was complaint about asbestos. Only then did the government departments follow up. So is the government reacting too late? So now, according to the legislation, someone dumping illegally in rural areas is infringing the law, even with permission. Now, can the government departments learn something from this? Is it some omission by the departments concerned? Now, the owners, including the owner of the private land at Chuen Long, he had to pay over $200,000 to deal with the waste material. So for the owners, they don't regularly keep watch over the site. And can the government do something? Now, where does the asbestos come from? If they find out the true culprit, it would have a very good deterrent effect. Now, looking at the records in 2011, now there was difficulty in collecting evidence within half a year. Otherwise, there can be no prosecution. But when the subcommittee talked about amending the legislation, there wasn't an extension of the evidence gathering period.
To enhance the effectiveness of evidence gathering for prosecution in their enforcement action, I think it's not a matter of 2 weeks or 2 months short. So the extension of the period is not a main factor for consideration in the improvement. We also have to take into account other factors, say for example fairness. The key issue to us is it's difficult to find the owner when it comes to the title. Based on our experience, we propose this this enhancement in the notification system. Before tipping was done, if there is consent and permission obtained and notification is given to the EPD, then it may be done. Enforcement will be easier if notification was not done under this system? Mr. Chan. Well, what if after the legislative amendment there are still fly tipping? Say in Taiwan, if there is a littering, the relevant authority will exhaust all avenues to find who the culprit is. And when it comes to fly tipping, will the department be more active in evidence collection, or will there be any changes or amendments? I think it would be difficult to resolve. I think members not just asking about the amendment. The question was whether the administration will use more resources or step up coordination among departments to find the culprit, because fly tipping has already occurred. And a question was also asked about the asbestos and about the progress of investigation. If we find the culprit, of course, it will be a good thing. But have you actually carried out any investigation? I believe that investigation is being conducted. Can anyone give me an update? Mr. Wong. Fly tipping or illegal landfilling will be investigated, and we will do our best to collect evidence. We will find information and find the company or person responsible. Asbestos can be spotted when old houses are demolished. It's quite easily identifiable. There is a coordination mechanism in place. We conduct inspections. There will be enforcement difficulties in finding the culprit. No, your time is up. Your time is up. I already let you overrun to 6 minutes. Ms. Helena Wong. Thank you. In Annex 2, the number of illegal of fly tipping has increased from 6,699 in 2000, and that is an increase from 6,153 in 2010 to 6,287 in 2011. And I see that the number of prosecution is about 40 a year. The highest number is 87. Fixed penalty tickets. You issue about 100 a year, and we're talking about a fixed penalty of 1,500. Is it I think it's one of the reasons why the problem is getting more and more serious, because as you said that it took place in the small hours, then the cost is small, and you may not catch them. And even if you manage to catch them, it's only a fine of $1,500. So there is great incentive for them to fly tip. So would you review to enhance the penalty and to step up inspection? I'm a legislator this year, but I see that in paragraph 3, there's already a coordination mechanism in place among government departments, and it's set up in the last legislative term. So I'd like to ask, this coordination mechanism set up in the last term, how many joint inspections have they conducted? What is their manpower level? And how many cases have they successfully detected? First, about penalty level. You catch someone and conviction is obtained, and it depends on the court when it on the penalty meted out. And for some people, maybe the cost is low if it's only a fixed penalty. And if we are to enhance the penalty, we're only enhancing the maximum penalty. It's for the court to decide the actual sentence. Maybe in the end, the court decides that $1,000 or so is appropriate. When it comes to the coordination mechanism, is anyone who can help me with the information? Do you have any information about the joint inspections conducted? If you don't have the information on hand, please give us it in written form. Is it the case that there has never been any joint inspections? Well, you can't deduce that from the lack of information on hand that there was no inspections done. We'll supply it in written form after the meeting. Sorry, I will let Mr. Wu first. 4 minutes. My first question. I don't know if I understand it correctly. There is an exemption mechanism under the new scheme. So if there is a filling of 1.2 meters, it will be exempted. I can't imagine why you need to fill an agricultural land for 1.2 meters. And I see from the paper that you focus on permission by the owner, and if there isn't permission from the owner, then you can take action. But if there is permission, then there is nothing you can do. When we're talking about private land, the owner allows someone else to put something on his land. If it's the case of multiple ownership, then you don't know which owner gives the permission. That is the situation currently. And under our proposal, all owners will have to give permission. And about the 1.2 meters, I'll defer to my colleague. Well, actually, there are different provisions or ordinances in place. They regulate fly tipping or landfilling. 1.2 meters, I think it is the overall consideration from planning. But in the paper, we have not mentioned about 1.2 meters. We understand from the public consultation that apart from fly tipping and illegal landfilling, there are also small-scale dumping of construction and demolition material. So we propose to apply the principle of reasonableness. You find the information collated from the public consultation in paragraph 15. You find the details of our proposals in paragraph 15. So the factor of 1.2 meters is not included because that is not the consideration for the mechanism. I understand that it will be more difficult because it will be difficult to get consent from all owners. But there are cases in which there is only one owner. Hypothetically speaking, if there is permission from the owner, does it mean that you will not be able to take any action? Yes, if permission is given to allow someone else to put the items on there, we cannot take action. But we're talking about landfilling and fly tipping, say, in new territories, and there is nuisance caused to the surrounding area. So it's not a matter of whether permission is given, it's whether it is reasonable in the first place. I believe it is stated in the document that, say, well, if something is put on your land and the size of it and whether it's asbestos, of course, is related. But if we're talking about the current ordinance, it focuses on one thing. It may be a nuisance. It may be in breach of some other ordinances, but it is not the focus here. So if it breeds mosquitoes and it contravenes another provision under another ordinance, and you can invoke other provisions to initiate prosecution. I will draw a line here. Mr. Tony Dare. Thank you. Just a quick question. About the tariff, I support taking action against illegal landfilling and fly tipping. You have to do something to stop them. And of course, it's for the court to decide the actual penalty. And if you enhance the maximum penalty, I think it is something that the court will take into consideration. My second point, as the different annex says so, different departments may have different focus. We can have the public monitoring it for us, and maybe you just call one number and the relevant government department will follow it up. Because do we have such a system in place? Because members of the public may not know which telephone number to call. Yes, for complaints you can just call government department. And as to whether there is a reporting system for, say, people in the same village, people who have obtained the permission are required to display the permission in a conspicuous place. So when someone sees fly tipping, without seeing the notice, then a complaint may be made. Well, of course, there is permission obtained, but it's just that it is not displayed. But at least members of the public may make inquiries, and this is conducive to members making inquiries. So when you consider what about enhancing the maximum penalty, well, perhaps when the amendment is introduced, members may consider raising the maximum penalty. But if we are to make such proposals, you will have to make the proposals in the first place, because very often when it comes to things like this, if it is not proposed by you, then the legal advisor may say that it is out of the scope. So you need to propose the amendment first. As a whole, we would like to enhance our enforcement action, enhance the deterrent effect.
Okay, I have some questions now. For this illegal dumping, it's hard to catch the culprit because they do it at night, and near trees land is unlike the urban areas. The owner may be far from the site, and in many cases it's difficult to locate all the owners. So the current bill says that we must get all the owners to sign, so it may be difficult. And also from the owner's perspective, whether you catch the culprit, the one who has to pay for the clearing up is the owner. Now we want to stiffen the penalty to make making the rules more complicated. Now, will we offer any safeguard for the owners? Maybe not after the bill. Now, if there is traffic accident, there is a compensation fund to which someone can apply if he's hospitalized. But for illegal dumping, no. We're clearing the asbestos. Now even it runs into 6 ditches. The government may not be able to catch the culprit, but it can certainly catch the owner to clean up the waste. So the government has to give it some thought to reduce the burden for the victim. Secondly, now yesterday I met with the dump truck operators association. Now they have a pilot scheme for these heavy vehicles. They would install GPS to record where they have been, so when it comes to evidence, you can find out where the drivers went to, whether they went to the site in question. Now, of course, not all the trucks would install GPS, but the Truck Owners Association said that would the trucks equipped with DGS get the government business in priority? Now, if the industry has installed GPS, then you can find out easily where they went to and whether they went to the site in question. Madam Chair, I think we are talking about how to enhance the mode of operation of the trade. Now, if we can adopt some advanced technology to find out where the truck went, and that may be a way to trace the illegal act. Now, certain companies may be willing to install GPS. They do not intend to do anything illegal. Now, we must require people in the trade to do this. Now, if we impose such a requirement, I may not oppose it. We haven't discussed this within the administration, but I don't know whether this will pass Legislative. Now, you may have privacy concerns. Now, they're not asking for legislation. They're just saying if they have this good practice, and when the government awards contracts, would that be a factor that you consider? Would that resolve the issue? Now, we may be able to help certain people with regard to government contracts, but if we require people to do this so that we can catch the culprits, that's something different. Now, your idea is that this would be voluntary. I'm just reflecting the trade's views, but it cannot resolve the issue that we are talking about. Also, how do we help the owners to clean up the waste, the construction waste? Please give that some thought. We come to the final item of agenda, review of the Air Pollution Index reporting system. The document is CB-1569/12-13-02. Again, the administration, please brief us on the document. I will start, and other colleagues can join. It's now Mr. Mok Wai Chun and Mr. Pang Sik Wing of EPD. Now, we know that the AQHI system is to replace the API system. The API system, I believe members and the public have commented on as being unreliable, inaccurate. Now we are going to tighten the AQO legislation, and that legislation has been tabled to Legislative. At the same time, we want to replace the API system by the new AQHI. Now the new AQHI system has been the result of study with experts for several years, and I believe after reading the document you will know that it's more complicated than API system, but it would be much more useful because it can explain to the public under what circumstances or how they can better protect their health. Now, this system On this system, we provide a detailed document to the AQO experts, and recently we received response from them. They think that the new system is better than the old one, and they support it. And due to the time constraint, I will not go into the details. Our meeting will last till 5. There are 2 members, Chen Ka-lok and Sin Chung Kai. Now, 5 minutes each. Mr. Chen Ka-lok. I thought Mr. Sin raised his hand earlier. Well, your name was recorded first. Now, the government has stepped up its pace to improve the indicator system, and the new perspective has taken health into account, and we welcome the administration coming to us at every stage. This is now an early stage. Now, the government will then have to talk to the different stakeholders on this 10+1 format, on the measures to address those. Now, I have right now 2 questions. Now, of course, the data right now is rather general. It's ambient and roadside. Now, in different parts of Hong Kong, there are different air qualities. For instance, Tung Chung or Causeway Bay. Now, under such a framework, for instance, I'm in Tung Chung. I work in a primary school there. I'm a physical education teacher. Under this arrangement, what health risks do I face every day? Or for the parents, how much risk do my children face every day? Secondly, I want to inquire. Now, the document says in para 11 that there will be liaison with doctors, employers, guidelines would be renewed, exigency plans. Now, what plans are those? And under the new scheme, what does the government expect the stakeholders to adopt by way of contingency plans? Mr. Lau? Now, on Mr. Chan's 2 questions, we have considered them. First, for the new indicator, now, as members may be aware, when we measure the air quality right now, there are 11 general observation stations and 3 roadside observation stations. And the EPD at the general stations and the roadside stations, you know about that. Now, Mr. Chen knows that people are concerned about their own communities. Say my school or my elderly home, what's the air quality nearby and what measures do I have to adopt? Now, when we introduce the new AQHI, the AQO, we saying that there will be more days on which measures have to be taken. So on the EPD, for the 14 stations, we report real time the air quality in each district. And when the new system is working, we hope to design some new applications so that, say, for instance, the VSAT teacher in Tung Chung, maybe we can notify him in real time the air quality as monitored by the Tung Chung station, and he can then follow our general guidelines to see what measures to adopt during VSAT class, so we would be more client-oriented. Secondly, on the measures to be taken. Now, 2 years ago, there was a sandstorm or dust storm on the mainland, and so the air quality was affected for an extended period in Hong Kong. So we established a trans-departmental committee, and a set of guidelines was drawn up, and a copy was provided to LegCo. It says that if the air pollution was over 100 for an extended period of time, what government departments have to do. For instance, in the Education Bureau, they would notify the schools on what points to note in vide classes, and if the particulates show a high reading, the EPD, the FEHD will again take certain steps on the streets. This is Sin Chung Kai. Now on page 9, the scale is 0 to 500. Now this is strange. Now why not 100? Why not 1,000? Well, Hong Kong people have a top mark of 100 in exams. So 100 is just slightly on the high side. So why 500? So would the indicators should they be more simple? The simpler the better, because we have different colors for rainstorm warnings, yellow for high warning, and serious, black, etc. So can you adopt some alternative indicators for better understanding, for easy understanding, and for simplification? Now, if you tell me the index is 75, they might think it's very high, but actually 500 is the highest, so people might not understand. They might be misled, and maybe you can use color. Now, first question is on how the current scale is set, and also when it comes to publicity, how do we sort of beautify it? Now, the second question is a bit easier. Maybe we deal with the first question on the technical aspects. Is it Mr. Pang or Mr. Mok?
I will attempt to answer the questions first. 0 to 500. When we formulate the existing API, we have drawn reference from the US approach, which is 0 to 500. What is important is that, well, there are many different approaches, some 0 to 100, some 0 to 500. What is important is that under different grading, we have to communicate to the public about what is supposed to be done. Mrs. Sin mentioned about using colors instead of an index. Say, for example, amber rainstorm warning, black rainstorm warning. Under the current API, there are already different colors. Say, 0 to 25 is green. Next is blue, yellow, red, black. So there is a set of scale in color. Media and members of the public don't really look at the color. Neither do they look at the index. But whether it is a very high level, whether it's over 100, if that is the case, that they need to take some measures, and the EPD will disseminate health advice. That is our current practice. The new practice under the proposal, which is set out in the paper, is that there are gradings. You can see that there is low, medium, high, very high, and severe. The emphasis will not be on the index. Instead, it will be on the ban, whether it's low, medium, high, very high, or severe. And in the future, there will be health advice about the measures to be taken. They will correspond to the different API ban, low, medium, high, very high, or severe. I think this will meet the need of the public. Of course, we're happy to listen to members' views on views of the public in the upcoming consultation. Thank you. Mr. Gary Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I really appreciate Mr. Mok for clearly explaining the issues that are close to the heart of the public. The existing index lacks the advice to public, compared to the current, compared to the proposal as to measures to be taken in different bands. About the sandstorm a couple of years ago, when it happened, there were voices saying that when air quality was extremely poor, outdoor manual work should be avoided. And there were voices suggesting about a suspension of schools or suspension of work. But we see that in the government's proposal there is no response in this regard. I understand that if there is suspension of work, of course, there will be an impact on the overall economy of Hong Kong. But when it comes to our children, whose respiratory system is yet to fully develop, if they are to go to school in these appalling situation, then it will be bad. Why, in the adjustment of the system, does the administration not make corresponding proposals? In PAC, we have had a discussion. The reporting system that we have sees an extremely high index most of the time. Do you think that the number of days for very high or severe will be higher or smaller? Would it give the wrong impression to the public that our air quality has improved? What we're actually concerned is that the public may get the impression that air quality has deteriorated because the number of days when API ban is very high will be more. So we hope that the legislators and the media will explain clearly to the public. We have dedicated some part in the paper about the comparison of the current system with the proposed system. Mr. Mok, would you like to give more information? It's paragraph 7. Thank you. I draw members' attention to Annex B. It is in relation to health advice under different ban or health risk. We're conducting a consultation, of course. We will listen to views about dissemination of information and the health advice. In Annex B, you see that for low and moderate under the current system, then, people can go on with their lives, conduct their normal course of business. But for people with heart or respiratory illness, as soon as they feel that they are not well, they should reduce outdoor physical exertion. And when it comes to high, that means air pollution is serious. So people with existing heart or respiratory illness, they should reduce outdoor physical exertion and to reduce the time of their stay outdoor. Children and the elderly will have to take similar measures. For outdoor workers and the general public, they can conduct their course of business as normal. So when it comes to very high and serious, people with existing heart or respiratory illness, when it comes to very high, the air pollution is worse. So they should reduce to the minimum outdoor exertion and the time of stay outdoors. For children and the elderly, they should, for serious, and when it's serious, these people should avoid going outdoors. And in relation to outdoor workers, there are guidelines in the Labor Department. They are disseminated to employers. They should take into consideration the air quality in giving advice to their workers. When the health risk is very high, employers of outdoor workers performing heavy manual work are advised to assess the risk of outdoor work and take preventive measures, say for example reducing outdoor physical exertion and reduce the time of stay. And if it is serious, then all outdoor workers are advised to do the same. May I have more time to elaborate on suspension of schools, etc.? Yes, suspension of schools of small children. This issue has been raised in the past. If the air quality is poor, we're not talking about roadside air quality, but the ambience level, that the air quality is poor, whether children should stay at school or at home makes no difference. They should avoid taking physical exercises outdoors. And if it's just on a roadside level where health risk is high, there should be some guidelines as to whether people should refrain from doing any outdoor exercise. But it depends on the location of the school. If it's susceptible to roadside pollutant emission, then they have to take the measures. But if the school is away from roadside, or if it's in an area where the air quality is better, then they can continue with their physical exercises. We'll have to work with schools on these guidelines, which we have done in the past. And we need to work to formulate guidelines with the new system. I welcome the administration for taking into account the implication on health on the air pollution index, because it's just like reminding the public that you should conserve energy, otherwise we will all suffer. The Labour Party, of course, will look at it from the perspective of workers. Suspension of schools, of course, parents and schools would be happy to cooperate when air quality is poor. In relation to kindergartens or RCHEs, residential care homes for the elderly. But when it comes to workers, if they stop working for one day, it will be delayed for a day. Even if workers are on a daily pay, then employers will consider whether they will be penalized for any delay. Of course, so workers working on the road are exposed to poor air quality, but at the same time there are cleaners. They have to push a trolley in the street. Security, which includes the police. There are different types of manual work engaged by them. I'm very concerned about people working at the roadside or cleaners. Well, currently it says that if it is hard, you can still continue with outdoor work. But when it comes to summer, when it's hotter, I remember in the most serious case, it reaches 180. Even if you appear to be strong, you may not be able to handle that. I don't want to see cases when life is threatened before you do something. In paragraph 11, you said that in the coming few months, you will liaise with various stakeholders for communication. You have to include the review of the employment ordinance. There should be protection of employees to give them a day of rest. It's not just about road workers. For some workers, without statutory protection, they would like to work for an extra day. It's not the case that the employers are scrupulous, but they want to make more money, and you will have to stop them risking their lives to work with a piece of legislation. So you will have to include the legislative amendment to the employment ordinance as well. Mr. Lai would like to add. Mr. Lai? Yes, your observation about the complexity of work process, workers working outdoor is valid. We have liaised with the relevant departments, say the Health Department, the Labour Department, and the Education Bureau. They have given us information about the different types of work because of the difference in work environment. When it comes to outdoor workers, it's more complicated. Considerations are more. It's just like Chairman, you said, there are many different types of work. If we adopt an across-the-board approach that when API reaches a certain level, then work has to be suspended, and it will be difficult in implementation. We've spoken to the Labour Department. Under the Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance, there is responsibility or duty of the employer to provide a safe and suitable work environment. I think we should use the same framework to allow the employer and the employee to take into account the uniqueness of their work to formulate appropriate guidelines. Say construction workers, should work be suspended, or should certain types of work that is physically demanding to be reduced? I think we will have to leave it for the employer and the employee to deal with that. It's difficult for the administration to say, like a typhoon number signal is hoisted, then everyone will have to stop the work. And we have expressed our concern.
勞工處嗰邊即係
I hope the EPD and the Labour Department would communicate among themselves. Of course, we would also follow up with regard to the employers. I think this would be more appropriate. We adopt different channels to bring out this point in the committee. Let's not forget the purpose of the AQHI. It communicates about air pollution and health, and after it's a tool for that. After we amend the legislation, it's more clear with regard to the levels, different levels. So we work on this communication tool, and then we take further steps. Now, on the introduction of policies with regard to labor, maybe AQHI is not the best for that. But we understand regarding the chairperson's point. Now, if we can improve our living quality. Now, in schools where it's easier, the interpretation tool, we think that should rest with the employer, because employers do have an obligation with regard to the health of the employees. So if Madam Chair wants us to take this as an opportunity to amend other policies, I think it may not be effective. I know this is not your policy scope, like the poverty line. It's the CNSD and Economic Affairs Department, and then Labor and Welfare Bureau will take care of the implementation. Of course, it's the same here. We will put this also to the in the relevant panel. Mr. Mock, all along we've discussed with the Labor Department on the introduction of the new AQHI system, and they know that there is a need to give better advice to employers so that they can take care of the health of their workers under the framework of the legislation. So the Labor Department has already this risk assessment guidelines for employers. So on the basis of the new AQHI, they will make some amendments and updates will be made to help the employers so that they can determine what to do. Next, second round, Chen Ka-lok, I will draw the line here. Now, I'd just like to comment on one or two more points. I thank Mr. Mock for his information. I'm glad to see that we have the present guideline, and you will amend those guidelines because this concerns health, and I think this panel will need more information. And I agreed with the chairperson that there should be follow-up with the Labour and Welfare Bureau. And the international community is concerned about air quality in Hong Kong, and with all these amendments and guidelines, I think we should consult the foreign chambers of commerce and etc. So this will help the international community having a suitable view of Hong Kong. Now, the international chambers of commerce are concerned about air quality in Hong Kong. We are consulting different stakeholders regarding the AQHI, and we will report to you on that in the future. When the AQHI AQ legislation is implemented, we hope that the AQHI system will also be implemented. We hope that both can be implemented in the near future. We thank members for taking part and the officials as well. We'll look forward to the next meeting.